Colonel Sarah Martinez had always known she was different from other soldiers. At 32 years old, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that came from years of proving herself in a man's world. Standing at 5 feet 6 inches with dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun, she didn't look intimidating to most people. But those who served under her knew better than to judge by appearances. The morning sun cast long shadows across the naval base in Norfolk, Virginia, as Sarah walked toward the main briefing hall. She wore her dress uniform with pride, every ribbon and medal placed with precision. Among them was a small, unassuming insignia that most people wouldn't recognize. It was a simple silver star with crossed swords, but, to those who knew military history, it represented something extraordinary. Sarah had earned this insignia through a classified mission that few people would ever hear about. 3 years earlier, she had led a covert operation in Afghanistan that saved the lives of 12 captured soldiers. The mission was so dangerous that it was given only a 5% chance of success. Sarah and her small team had infiltrated enemy territory, fought through hostile forces, and successfully extracted all 12 men without losing a single life. For this act of heroism, she was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, one of the highest honors in the military. But, today, as she entered the briefing hall, Sarah wasn't thinking about past glories. She was focused on the presentation she was about to give to a group of elite military personnel about new counter-terrorism strategies. The hall was filled with some of the most decorated soldiers in the country, including several Navy SEALs who had volunteered to attend the briefing. As Sarah made her way to the front of the room, she noticed a group of Navy SEALs sitting in the back row. They were an impressive sight in their dress uniforms, their chests covered with ribbons and badges that told stories of countless dangerous missions. Among them was Lieutenant Commander Jake Thompson, a man whose reputation preceded him wherever he went. Thompson was everything people imagined when they thought of a Navy SEAL. At 6 feet 2 inches tall with broad shoulders and a square jaw, he looked like he had stepped out of a recruitment poster. His uniform displayed an impressive array of decorations, including a silver star, multiple bronze stars, and various commendation medals. He had served in Iraq, Afghanistan, and several other classified locations around the world. As Sarah began setting up her presentation materials, she could hear quiet conversations from around the room. Most of the attendees were discussing the upcoming training exercises or sharing stories from recent deployments. But, from the back of the room, she heard something that made her pause. "Look at all those ribbons," Thompson said loudly enough for others to hear. "Must be nice to get decorated for sitting behind a desk." His comment was followed by snickers from some of his teammates. Sarah kept her composure and continued preparing her materials. She had heard comments like this before. In her 15-year military career, she had faced countless instances of discrimination and doubt. Early in her service, she had learned that the best response to such comments was to let her actions speak for themselves. But Thompson wasn't finished. As Sarah walked past his table to adjust the projector, he spoke again, this time directly to her. "Excuse me, Colonel, but I couldn't help but notice that little star on your uniform. What's that one for? Exceptional filing skills?" The room fell silent. Several officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Sarah stopped and turned to face Thompson. For a moment, she said nothing, simply looking at him with calm, steady eyes. The silence stretched on, becoming more uncomfortable with each passing second. Finally, Sarah spoke in a clear, measured voice. "Lieutenant Commander Thompson, I assume you're referring to the Distinguished Service Cross." She pointed to the silver star that had drawn his attention. This was awarded for actions taken during Operation Silent Thunder in Afghanistan. Thompson's expression showed he had never heard of Operation Silent Thunder, which wasn't surprising since most details of the mission remained classified. He seemed to interpret Sarah's response as an attempt to impress him with made-up accomplishments. "Operation Silent Thunder?" Thompson said with obvious skepticism. "Sounds like something from a video game. What did you do, coordinate supply runs?" More laughter came from his section of the room. Sarah felt her jaw tighten slightly, but her voice remained calm. The operation involved the rescue of 12 captured soldiers from a Taliban compound in the Helmand province. The mission took place over 48 hours in hostile territory. Right, Thompson said, rolling his eyes. And I'm sure you were right there in the thick of it, leading the charge. His sarcasm was unmistakable, and several other SEALs chuckled at his comment. What Thompson and most others in the room didn't know was that Sarah's background was far more complex than her current position as a strategic planning officer might suggest. Before becoming a colonel, she had served 8 years as a member of an elite special operations unit. This unit was so classified that its existence was known only to a select few within the military hierarchy. Sarah had undergone training that was arguably more rigorous than what Navy SEALs experienced. She had learned advanced combat techniques, specialized in close-quarters fighting, and become an expert in multiple weapons systems. More importantly, she had proven herself in actual combat situations where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death. The mission that earned her the Distinguished Service Cross had begun when intelligence reports indicated that 12 American soldiers had been captured during a routine patrol. The soldiers were being held in a heavily fortified compound that was surrounded by hostile forces. Traditional rescue operations would have required a large-scale assault that would likely result in the deaths of the hostages. Instead, Sarah had proposed and led a small team infiltration mission. With only 4 other operatives, she had penetrated deep into enemy territory under cover of darkness. The team had spent 6 hours moving through dangerous terrain, avoiding enemy patrols and surveillance systems. When they finally reached the compound, they discovered the situation was even worse than intelligence reports had indicated. The compound was heavily guarded, with more than 50 enemy fighters. The captured soldiers were being held in a basement location that could only be accessed through the main building. Any attempt at a direct assault would result in the immediate execution of the hostages. Sarah had to make a decision that would affect the lives of 16 people, including her own team. She chose to create a diversion. While her team prepared to extract the hostages, Sarah single-handedly infiltrated the main building and planted explosive charges in strategic locations. When the charges detonated, they created enough chaos and confusion for her team to reach the basement and begin the extraction. But the plan encountered unexpected complications. As Sarah's team was leading the hostages out of the compound, they came under heavy fire from enemy forces who had quickly regrouped. Sarah found herself cut off from her team, surrounded by hostile fighters, and running low on ammunition. For the next 4 hours, Sarah conducted a running battle through the compound and surrounding area. She used every skill she had learned in special operations training, moving from building to building, using stealth and tactical superiority to overcome numerical disadvantage. During this time, she eliminated more than 20 enemy fighters while protecting the escape route for her team and the rescued soldiers. By the time backup forces arrived, Sarah had successfully ensured that all 12 hostages and her 4 team members had reached the extraction point safely. She had sustained 2 gunshot wounds and severe burns from an explosion, but she had refused medical evacuation until every other person was safely aboard the rescue helicopters. The mission's success was so remarkable that it became a case study in special operations schools. Military strategists analyzed every aspect of the operation, trying to understand how such a small team had achieved what many considered impossible. Sarah's leadership and combat skills during the mission were recognized not just by American forces, but by Allied military leaders around the world. However, the classified nature of the operation meant that very few people knew the true story behind Sarah's Distinguished Service Cross. To most observers, including Lieutenant Commander Thompson, she appeared to be just another officer who had somehow acquired an impressive collection of ribbons and medals through administrative work or political connections. As the tension in the briefing room continued to build, Sarah made a decision that would change the course of the entire day. Instead of allowing Thompson's disrespect to continue, she decided to address it directly. But she would do so in a way that maintained military protocol while still making her point clear. "Lieutenant Commander Thompson," she said in a voice that carried authority throughout the room, "I understand that you may have questions about my qualifications or experience. If you would like to discuss this matter further, I would be happy to continue this conversation after the briefing. For now, however, I believe we should focus on the matter at hand." Thompson seemed surprised by Sarah's direct response. He had expected her to either ignore his comments or become defensive. Instead, she had challenged him professionally while maintaining her dignity. For a moment, he appeared uncertain about how to respond. "Of course, Colonel," he said finally. "I look forward to that conversation." But, as Sarah began her presentation, neither she nor Thompson realized that their exchange had been overheard by several people outside the briefing room. Among those listeners were 4 of the most senior military leaders in the country, generals who had come to the base for an unrelated meeting but had stopped by to observe Sarah's presentation. These 4 generals not only knew about Operation Silent Thunder, but they had been involved in planning and approving the mission. They knew exactly who Sarah Martinez was and what she had accomplished. And they had just witnessed one of the most decorated Navy SEALs in the service publicly mock a soldier whose heroism exceeded anything he had ever achieved. As Sarah continued with her presentation, demonstrating expertise in counterterrorism strategy that impressed even the most experienced officers in the room, the 4 generals exchanged meaningful glances. They had seen enough. It was time for Lieutenant Commander Thompson to learn exactly who he had chosen to disrespect. The stage was set for a confrontation that would become legendary within military circles, a moment when assumptions would be shattered and respect would be earned in the most dramatic way possible. Sarah Martinez was about to receive recognition that was long overdue, and Jake Thompson was about to learn that judging someone by their appearance could lead to the most humbling experience of his military career. Sarah's presentation began with a detailed analysis of emerging terrorist threats in the Middle East. Her expertise was immediately apparent as she discussed complex strategic concepts with the ease of someone who had lived these realities firsthand. She spoke about insurgent tactics, intelligence gathering methods, and the psychological aspects of modern warfare with a depth that impressed even the most seasoned officers in the room. As she clicked through her presentation slides, Sarah noticed that Lieutenant Commander Thompson had stopped his earlier commentary. He was now paying attention, though she could see skepticism still written across his face. The other Navy SEALs in his group were also focused on her words, perhaps recognizing that her knowledge went far beyond what they had initially expected. "The key to successful counter-terrorism operations," Sarah explained, pointing to a tactical diagram on the screen, "is understanding that conventional military thinking often doesn't apply. We're dealing with an enemy that doesn't follow traditional rules of engagement. They use civilian populations as shields, operate in urban environments, and employ psychological warfare as much as conventional weapons." General Robert Hayes, one of the 4 senior officers listening from the hallway, nodded approvingly. He had worked with Sarah on several classified operations and knew that her insights came from direct experience, not just theoretical study. General Hayes was a decorated Vietnam veteran who had spent his entire career in special operations. He had seen many officers give presentations, but few with Sarah's combination of academic knowledge and practical experience. Standing beside him was General Patricia Williams, the highest-ranking female officer in the Army and someone who had faced many of the same challenges Sarah had encountered throughout her career. General Williams had been following Sarah's career with interest, recognizing in her a kindred spirit who had succeeded despite the obstacles placed in her path. The 3rd General, Michael Chen, was an expert in military intelligence who had recommended Sarah for several sensitive assignments. He knew about her analytical skills and her ability to process complex information under pressure. General Chen had been present during the debriefing sessions following Operation Silent Thunder and had been impressed not just by Sarah's heroism, but by her detailed tactical analysis of the mission. The 4th General, Thomas Rodriguez, was the youngest of the group at 52 years old. He had risen through the ranks quickly due to his innovative approaches to modern warfare and his ability to adapt traditional military strategies to contemporary threats. General Rodriguez had specifically requested that Sarah give this presentation because he believed her insights could benefit the entire special operations community. As Sarah continued her presentation, she began discussing specific case studies from recent operations. She spoke about the challenges of operating in environments where the enemy could blend into civilian populations, the importance of cultural sensitivity in military operations, and the need for soldiers to be prepared for rapidly changing situations. "In Afghanistan, I observed operations where small teams achieved objectives that larger forces had failed to accomplish," Sarah said. "The key wasn't superior firepower or numbers. It was precise intelligence, careful planning, and the ability to adapt when situations didn't go according to plan. Lieutenant Commander Thompson shifted in his seat. Something about the way Sarah spoke suggested she wasn't just discussing these operations as an outside observer. There was a specificity to her comments, a level of detail that suggested direct experience. But Thompson still couldn't believe that this colonel had actually been involved in the kind of high-risk operations she was describing. Sarah noticed Thompson's reaction and decided to provide more specific examples. "I want to share with you the tactical analysis of a particular operation that took place 3 years ago in the Helmand province," she said. The mission involved the rescue of 12 captured soldiers from a heavily fortified Taliban compound. The room became very quiet. Several officers recognized that Sarah was about to discuss Operation Silent Thunder, though most of them knew only the basic details of what had occurred. The 4 generals in the hallway exchanged glances, knowing they were about to witness something significant. Intelligence reports indicated that traditional rescue operations would likely result in the deaths of the hostages, Sarah continued. The compound was heavily defended, with an estimated 50 to 70 enemy fighters. The captured soldiers were being held in a basement location that could only be accessed through the main building. Sarah clicked to a new slide that showed a detailed diagram of the compound. The diagram was incredibly detailed, showing not just the layout of buildings but also defensive positions, guard rotations, and potential escape routes. It was clear that this information had been gathered through extensive reconnaissance and careful analysis. The mission was assigned to a 5-person special operations team, Sarah said. The team leader made the decision to use a small unit infiltration approach rather than a large-scale assault. This decision was based on analysis showing that the hostages would be executed if the enemy detected a major military operation. Thompson leaned forward in his seat. The level of detail in Sarah's presentation was extraordinary. She wasn't just discussing general tactics, she was providing specific information about troop movements, timing, and decision-making processes. Either Sarah had access to incredibly detailed classified reports, or she had been directly involved in the operation. The infiltration phase of the operation required the team to move through 12 miles of hostile territory, Sarah continued. They avoided 3 enemy patrols and 2 surveillance checkpoints before reaching the target compound. The approach took 6 hours longer than planned due to increased enemy activity in the area. Sarah clicked to another slide showing a timeline of the operation. Every detail was precisely documented, from the time of initial insertion to the final extraction. The timeline showed that the operation had taken 48 hours to complete, far longer than originally planned. Upon reaching the compound, the team discovered that the situation was more complex than intelligence reports had indicated, Sarah said. The number of enemy fighters was higher than expected, and the hostages were being held in a more secure location. The team leader had to make a critical decision about how to proceed. General Hayes found himself holding his breath. He had read the classified reports about Operation Silent Thunder, but hearing Sarah describe it in such detail was bringing back memories of the tense hours when military leadership had waited for updates from the field. The operation had been monitored in real time by senior officials who understood that failure would not only cost the lives of the captured soldiers but would also represent a significant intelligence loss. The team leader decided to create a diversion, Sarah continued. While the rest of the team prepared to extract the hostages, one team member infiltrated the main building and planted explosive charges in strategic locations. The explosions would create enough chaos and confusion to allow the extraction team to reach the hostages. Sarah paused and looked directly at Thompson. However, the plan encountered unexpected complications. After the explosives detonated, the extraction team came under heavy fire while leading the hostages out of the compound. The team member who had planted the explosives became separated from the group and was surrounded by enemy forces. The room was completely silent now. Even Thompson had stopped his skeptical expressions and was listening intently. Something about Sarah's delivery suggested that she wasn't just reading from a report or recounting something she had heard from others. For the next 4 hours, Sarah continued, this individual conducted a running battle through the compound and surrounding area. Using advanced combat training and tactical expertise, they managed to eliminate more than 20 enemy fighters while protecting the escape route for the rest of the team and the rescued soldiers. Sarah clicked to a new slide that showed photographs from the aftermath of the operation. The images were dramatic, showing the destroyed compound and the successful extraction of all 12 hostages. But what was most impressive was a photograph showing the entire rescue team after their return to base. Thompson stared at the photograph. In the center of the image was a female soldier in combat gear, her face partially obscured by equipment and camouflage paint. But there was something familiar about her stance and build. As Thompson looked more closely, he began to realize something that made his stomach drop. The mission was successful, Sarah said. All 12 hostages were rescued without loss of life. The team member who had become separated managed to fight their way to the extraction point despite sustaining multiple injuries. For their actions during this operation, the team leader was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. Sarah turned off the projector and faced her audience. The room remained silent for several long moments. Then, slowly, recognition began to dawn on the faces of several officers who were looking back and forth between Sarah and the photograph on the screen. Lieutenant Commander Thompson felt his face growing hot as he realized what had just occurred. The woman he had mocked for her insignia, the officer he had suggested earned her decorations through desk work, had just described in precise detail one of the most heroic operations in recent military history. And, from the way she had presented the information, it was clear that she hadn't been reading from reports or second-hand accounts. "Colonel Martinez," said Commander Patricia Walsh, one of the Navy SEALs in the front row, "may I ask what role you played in Operation Silent Thunder?" Sarah looked directly at Walsh, then let her gaze sweep across the entire room before settling on Thompson. "I was the team leader," she said simply. The silence that followed this revelation was deafening. Thompson felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. He had just spent the better part of an hour mocking a soldier whose heroism exceeded anything he had ever achieved. Worse, he had done so in front of dozens of other officers who had now witnessed his humiliation. But Thompson's embarrassment was about to become much worse. As Sarah concluded her presentation and began gathering her materials, the 4 generals who had been listening from the hallway decided it was time to make their presence known. They had heard enough to understand exactly what had transpired, and they were prepared to ensure that proper respect was shown to one of the most decorated soldiers in the military. General Hayes entered the room first, his footsteps echoing in the continued silence. Behind him came Generals Williams, Chen, and Rodriguez, their presence immediately commanding the attention of every person in the room. As the 4 generals walked toward the front of the room, every officer present came to attention. Thompson felt his heart racing as he realized that his mockery of Colonel Martinez had been overheard by some of the most senior military leaders in the country. These were generals whose approval could make or destroy a military career, and he had just demonstrated incredible disrespect toward a soldier they clearly held in high regard. The stage was now set for a confrontation that would become the stuff of military legend. 4 of the most respected generals in the armed forces were about to publicly recognize the heroism of Colonel Sarah Martinez, while simultaneously demonstrating to Lieutenant Commander Thompson exactly how badly he had misjudged the situation. The next few minutes would change the trajectory of both of their careers and create a story that would be told in military academies for years to come. General Robert Hayes stepped forward first, his distinguished appearance commanding immediate attention from everyone in the room. At 61 years old, he carried himself with the dignity of someone who had dedicated his entire life to military service. His chest displayed ribbons representing 5 decades of distinguished service, including 2 Purple Hearts, a Distinguished Service Cross of his own, and numerous commendation medals from operations around the world. Behind him walked General Patricia Williams, whose presence was equally commanding. As the highest-ranking female officer in the Army, she had broken through barriers that many thought impossible to overcome. Her career had been marked by extraordinary achievements in both combat and leadership positions, making her one of the most respected figures in the military. She had personally recommended Sarah for promotion several times and had followed her career with great interest. General Michael Chen followed, his analytical mind already processing the situation he had just witnessed. As head of military intelligence operations, he understood better than most the incredible complexity and danger of Operation Silent Thunder. He had been present during the real-time monitoring of the mission and had watched as Sarah's team accomplished what many experts had considered impossible. Finally, General Thomas Rodriguez entered, his relatively youthful appearance belying his extensive combat experience and innovative military thinking. Despite being the youngest of the four generals, his strategic insights and leadership abilities had earned him rapid promotion through the ranks. He had specifically requested Sarah's presentation because he believed her experience could benefit the entire special operations community. The four generals walked with purpose toward the front of the room where Sarah stood. Every officer present remained at attention, understanding that they were witnessing something significant. The tension in the room was palpable, with Lieutenant Commander Thompson feeling increasingly uncomfortable as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. General Hayes reached Sarah first and stopped directly in front of her. For a moment, he said nothing, simply looking at her with an expression of deep respect. Then, slowly and deliberately, he raised his right hand in a perfect military salute. The gesture was not just a formality, it was a public acknowledgement of Sarah's heroism and a sign of his personal respect for her achievements. "Colonel Martinez," General Hayes said in a clear voice that carried throughout the room, "it is an honor to serve alongside someone of your caliber. Your actions during Operation Silent Thunder represent the highest traditions of military service and heroism." Sarah returned the salute with equal precision, her face showing professional composure despite the emotional significance of the moment. Receiving recognition from General Hayes, a man whose reputation for heroism was legendary within military circles, was an honor that few soldiers ever experienced. Before Sarah could respond, General Williams stepped forward and also rendered a crisp salute. "Colonel Martinez, your courage and leadership have been an inspiration to female officers throughout the military," she said. "Your success in special operations has opened doors for other women who aspire to serve in combat roles." General Chen approached next, his salute accompanied by words that carried particular weight given his role in intelligence operations. "Colonel Martinez, your tactical analysis and execution of Operation Silent Thunder has become required study material in our advanced strategy courses. Your mission planning and adaptability under pressure represent textbook examples of special operations excellence." Finally, General Rodriguez stepped forward, completing the unprecedented display of respect from four of the military's most senior leaders. "Colonel Martinez, your innovative approaches to counter-terrorism operations have influenced strategic thinking at the highest levels of military leadership. Your insights continue to shape how we prepare for modern warfare challenges." The sight of four generals simultaneously saluting a single colonel was extraordinary by any military standard. These were leaders who commanded hundreds of thousands of soldiers, whose decisions affected national security policy, and whose approval was sought by the most ambitious officers in the service. For them to publicly demonstrate such respect was a clear message to everyone present about Sarah's true standing within the military hierarchy. Lieutenant Commander Thompson watched this display with growing horror. He had not only insulted a decorated war hero, but he had done so in the presence of the four generals who were now demonstrating their high regard for her. The full magnitude of his error was becoming clear, and he could feel the disapproving stares of other officers in the room. Commander Patricia Walsh, the Navy SEAL who had asked Sarah about her role in Operation Silent Thunder, stepped forward from the front row. As one of the few female SEALs in the service, she understood the significance of what was happening. She rendered her own salute to Sarah, followed by several other Navy SEALs who recognized that they were in the presence of someone whose achievements exceeded their own. "Colonel Martinez," Commander Walsh said, "on behalf of the SEAL community, I want to express our deep respect for your service and sacrifice. Your actions during Operation Silent Thunder exemplify the courage and skill that we all strive to achieve." The spontaneous display of respect continued as other officers throughout the room began saluting Sarah. Word was spreading quickly about what had transpired, and soldiers who had not even attended the presentation were gathering outside the briefing room to pay their respects. Within minutes, a crowd of more than 100 military personnel had assembled, all wanting to honor someone whose heroism had become legendary within certain circles of the military. General Hayes turned his attention to the assembled group, his expression serious as he prepared to address the situation that had prompted this extraordinary gathering. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said in a voice that commanded attention, "what you have witnessed today is a reminder that heroism often comes in forms that we might not immediately recognize." He paused, allowing his words to sink in before continuing. Colonel Martinez's achievements during Operation Silent Thunder represent some of the finest moments in recent military history. Her courage, tactical skill, and leadership under impossible circumstances saved the lives of 12 American soldiers and demonstrated the highest standards of military excellence. General Williams stepped forward to add her own comments. "This is also a reminder that we must never judge our fellow service members by their appearance or make assumptions about their capabilities based on superficial observations. Every person wearing this uniform has earned their place through dedication, sacrifice, and commitment to serving their country." The pointed nature of General Williams' comments was not lost on anyone present. While she had not specifically mentioned Thompson's earlier behavior, her words served as a clear rebuke to anyone who had participated in or tolerated the disrespectful treatment of Colonel Martinez. General Chen addressed the group next, his analytical mind focusing on the broader implications of the day's events. Operation Silent Thunder remains classified, but the tactical lessons learned from that mission have influenced special operations planning throughout the military. Colonel Martinez's debriefing sessions and after-action reports have been studied by strategists at every level of command. He looked directly at Sarah as he continued. Her insights into small unit tactics, crisis decision-making, and adaptation under pressure have literally saved lives in subsequent operations. The techniques she developed during that mission have been incorporated into training programs for special operations forces across all service branches. General Rodriguez concluded the general's comments by addressing the room's broader purpose. "We came here today to observe a presentation on counterterrorism strategy. What we witnessed instead was a masterclass in leadership, professionalism, and grace under pressure." Colonel Martinez demonstrated not only her expertise in military strategy but also her ability to maintain dignity and composure when faced with disrespect. Thompson felt every word of the general's comments like physical blows. The contrast between his behavior and Sarah's professional response was stark and humiliating. He had shown himself to be petty and judgmental, while she had demonstrated the kind of character that earned respect from the highest levels of military leadership. As the generals finished their remarks, they remained standing at attention facing Sarah, maintaining their salutes in an extended display of respect. Other officers throughout the room followed their example, creating a scene that was both moving and unprecedented. Never before had so many senior military leaders simultaneously honored a single officer in such a public manner. Sarah finally spoke, her voice carrying clearly throughout the now crowded room. "Generals, fellow officers, I am deeply honored by this recognition. However, I want to emphasize that Operation Silent Thunder was successful because of the entire team's efforts, not just my own actions. The 4 soldiers who served with me on that mission displayed courage and skill that made the rescue possible." Her gracious response only enhanced the respect she had earned from those present. Even in this moment of personal triumph, she was deflecting credit to others and demonstrating the kind of humility that marked true leadership. But the day's events were far from over. Thompson knew he had to address his earlier behavior, and the watching generals clearly expected some form of accountability for the disrespect that had been shown to one of the military's most decorated soldiers. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test Thompson's character and determine whether he could salvage anything from this humiliating situation. As the crowd continued to grow and more stories of Sarah's achievements began circulating among the assembled soldiers, it became clear that this day would be remembered as a turning point. Not just for Thompson and Sarah, but for everyone present who had witnessed how assumptions and prejudices could blind someone to the true character and achievements of their fellow service members. The 4 generals remained at attention, their continued salute serving as both honor for Sarah and a silent rebuke to anyone who had failed to show proper respect. The next few minutes would determine whether Lieutenant Commander Thompson possessed the character to acknowledge his mistakes and learn from this experience, or whether his career would be permanently damaged by his poor judgment and disrespectful behavior. Lieutenant Commander Jake Thompson stood frozen in place, watching as the 4 generals maintained their salute to Colonel Martinez. The weight of his mistake pressed down on him like a physical burden. Every eye in the room seemed to be focused on him, waiting to see how he would respond to the revelation that he had mocked one of the most decorated soldiers in the military. Thompson's mind raced as he tried to process what had just occurred. Less than 2 hours ago, he had been confident in his position as an elite Navy SEAL with an impressive service record. He had looked at Sarah Martinez and seen what he thought was another desk officer who had somehow accumulated decorations through political connections or administrative work. Now he understood that he had been catastrophically wrong. The Distinguished Service Cross that he had mocked represented heroism that exceeded anything he had achieved in his own distinguished career. Thompson had earned his decorations through courage and skill in combat, but Sarah's actions during Operation Silent Thunder represented a level of tactical brilliance and personal courage that few soldiers ever demonstrated. She had single-handedly held off more than 50 enemy fighters while ensuring the safe extraction of 12 hostages and her own team members. As the moments passed, Thompson realized that everyone was waiting for him to respond. The 4 generals had made their position clear through their unprecedented display of respect for Sarah. Now it was up to him to determine whether he would compound his error through continued disrespect or demonstrate the character to acknowledge his mistake and learn from it. General Hayes finally lowered his salute, followed by the other 3 generals and the assembled officers. But their attention remained focused on the situation, clearly expecting some form of resolution to the disrespectful treatment that Sarah had received. Thompson took a deep breath and stepped forward. He had served in the military long enough to understand that this moment would define the rest of his career. He could either demonstrate the kind of character that the military valued, or he could allow his pride to prevent him from doing what was obviously right. "Colonel Martinez," Thompson said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "I owe you a profound apology." He paused, gathering his thoughts before continuing. "My comments about your insignia and your service record were completely inappropriate and based on ignorance and prejudice that has no place in the military." Sarah watched Thompson carefully, her expression remaining neutral as she waited to see whether his apology would be genuine or merely a perfunctory response to the presence of the generals. "I made assumptions about your background and achievements based on nothing more than superficial observations," Thompson continued. "Those assumptions were not only wrong, but they led me to show disrespect to a soldier whose heroism exceeds anything I have accomplished in my own career." Thompson's words carried the weight of genuine remorse, and several officers in the room began to relax slightly as they realized he was taking responsibility for his behavior rather than making excuses or deflecting blame. "Your actions during Operation Silent Thunder represent everything that the military stands for," Thompson said. "Courage, sacrifice, tactical excellence, and leadership under the most extreme circumstances. I failed to recognize these qualities because I allowed prejudice and assumptions to cloud my judgment." General Williams watched Thompson's apology with interest, recognizing that this moment represented an opportunity for growth and learning that could benefit the entire military community. She had witnessed similar situations throughout her career, where officers had to confront their own biases and preconceptions about what courage and competence look like. "Furthermore," Thompson continued, "I want to acknowledge that my behavior reflected poorly not just on myself, but on the Navy SEAL community as a whole. SEALs are supposed to recognize and respect excellence wherever we find it, regardless of the form it takes. I failed to live up to that standard today." Sarah finally spoke, her voice calm and measured. "Lieutenant Commander Thompson, I appreciate your apology. We all make mistakes in judgment, and the measure of a person is how they respond when those mistakes are brought to their attention." Her gracious response surprised Thompson, who had expected anger or continued confrontation. Instead, Sarah was demonstrating the kind of leadership and character that had enabled her to succeed in the most challenging military environments. "However," Sarah continued, "I hope this experience will serve as a reminder that excellence comes in many forms, and that we must be careful not to judge our fellow service members based on superficial characteristics or assumptions about what heroism looks like." General Hayes decided it was time to address the broader implications of what had occurred. "What we have witnessed here today provides valuable lessons for everyone present," he said. "Lieutenant Commander Thompson made an error in judgment that could have been avoided through better understanding and respect for his fellow service members." The general's words carried weight not just because of his rank, but because of his reputation for fairness and wisdom. Officers throughout the room listened carefully, understanding that they were receiving guidance from one of the most respected leaders in the military. However, General Hayes continued, Lieutenant Commander Thompson has also demonstrated the character to acknowledge his mistake and take responsibility for his actions. This kind of accountability is essential for military leadership, and his willingness to apologize publicly shows the kind of integrity we expect from our officers. General Chen stepped forward to add his own perspective. This situation also highlights the importance of understanding the achievements and capabilities of our fellow service members. Operation Silent Thunder remains classified, but the tactical innovations that Colonel Martinez developed during that mission have influenced special operations planning across all service branches. He looked directly at Thompson as he continued. The techniques she pioneered in small unit infiltration and extraction have been incorporated into SEAL training programs. In essence, Lieutenant Commander Thompson has been trained using methods that Colonel Martinez helped develop. This revelation added another layer of irony to the situation. Thompson had not only mocked someone whose heroism exceeded his own achievements, but he had unknowingly benefited from her tactical innovations in his own training and operations. General Rodriguez addressed the assembled group with his characteristic focus on practical applications and learning opportunities. Moving forward, this experience should remind all of us to approach our fellow service members with respect and to avoid making assumptions based on incomplete information. He gestured towards Sarah as he spoke. Colonel Martinez's achievements demonstrate that excellence comes in many forms and that we must be prepared to recognize and honor heroism wherever we find it. As the generals concluded their remarks, Thompson realized that he had an opportunity to turn this humiliating experience into a learning moment that could benefit his own development as a military leader. The way he handled the next few minutes would determine whether this incident would be remembered as a career-ending mistake or as a moment of growth and character development. Colonel Martinez, Thompson said, I would be honored if you would allow me to learn from your experience and expertise. If you would be willing, I would like to request additional briefings on the tactical innovations you developed during Operation Silent Thunder. Sarah considered Thompson's request carefully. She could see that his apology was genuine and that he was truly interested in learning from the experience rather than simply minimizing the damage to his reputation. I would be happy to share appropriate tactical information, Sarah replied. Some details of Operation Silent Thunder must remain classified, but there are certainly lessons learned that could benefit SEAL operations and other special forces missions. The tension in the room began to dissipate as it became clear that the situation was being resolved in a constructive manner. Thompson had demonstrated the character to acknowledge his mistakes and learn from them, while Sarah had shown the kind of grace and professionalism that had made her such an effective leader. Commander Patricia Walsh stepped forward to address both Thompson and Sarah. This has been an educational experience for all of us, she said. It serves as a reminder that the military is strongest when we recognize and respect the achievements of all service members, regardless of gender, background, or the form their service takes. Over the following hours, word of the day's events spread throughout the military community. The story of how 4 generals had simultaneously saluted Colonel Sarah Martinez after a Navy SEAL had mocked her insignia became legendary within military circles. But equally important was the story of how Thompson had responded to his mistake with genuine accountability and a commitment to learning. In the weeks that followed, Sarah did provide additional briefings to SEAL units and other special operations forces, sharing tactical insights that proved valuable in subsequent missions. Thompson attended every session, taking detailed notes and demonstrating the kind of professional respect that should have characterized his initial interaction with Sarah. The incident also led to broader discussions within the military about unconscious bias and the importance of recognizing excellence in all its forms. Training programs were developed to help service members identify and overcome prejudicial assumptions that could interfere with military effectiveness and unit cohesion. For Sarah, the day represented validation of her years of service and sacrifice. The public recognition from 4 of the military's most senior leaders provided acknowledgement that had been long overdue. More importantly, it sent a clear message to other female service members that their achievements would be recognized and respected. For Thompson, the experience became a defining moment in his military career. He learned valuable lessons about leadership, respect, and the dangers of making assumptions about fellow service members. The humiliation he experienced served as a powerful reminder that true military excellence required not just physical courage and tactical skill, but also the wisdom to recognize and honor the achievements of others. The story of Colonel Sarah Martinez and Lieutenant Commander Jake Thompson became a case study in military leadership courses, illustrating both the importance of overcoming bias and the power of accountability in building stronger, more effective military units. It reminded everyone that heroism comes in many forms, and that the strongest military organizations are those that recognize and celebrate excellence wherever it is found. Years later, both Sarah and Thompson would look back on this day as a turning point in their careers and their understanding of what it truly meant to serve with honor and distinction in the United States military.